Hello, and welcome to the podcast, The Other Woman and the Wife, where we discuss why infidelity exists and what we can learn from it. Today in the studio, I have Luke yet again, and you guys can expect Luke a lot more. Luke is the host of the podcast After the Affair. He also has a private community on Facebook that he's very strict about, so don't go in there and be an asshole. And his private Facebook group is called After the Affair with Luke Shillings, so you should go and check it out. But Luke, how are you?
I'm great. Yeah, it's great to be here. Great to see you again, catch up. And it doesn't feel like it's that long since we spoke last time. And
It hasn't been
for it. I love it.
I guess 2 weeks now, right?
Yeah, just a couple of weeks, I think. Yeah. And we've just hit the summer holidays here in the UK. So the kids broke up from school last week. And of course, trying to juggle everything and fit everything in and enjoy life and take advantage of a bit of nice weather.
Luke, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you on the podcast today is the community that we're building for men. And I have selected you as the man in the leading position. And I'm super stoked about it. We've been working on it now for like 3 months?
Thereabouts, yeah.
Yeah, finally got everything solidified. We're going to be making it available for purchase pretty soon, and you're going to be in there. And I thought we could just open up an open dialogue with you kind of interviewing me on what the experience of building a community has been like and what the purpose of the community is. So I'm happy to turn the
absolutely exciting.
Turn the host seat over to you.
I like it. And somewhat unexpected as well. So perfect. Okay. So, well, maybe we should start at the beginning. Like, what was it that inspired you to even create the community for the women when you started? Like, what was that motivation? Because it was sometime after your actual personal lived experience.
Oh my God, yeah, like 10 fucking years. Yeah. What inspired me to actually kind of like create this whole thing, or like even going public with the fact that I had an affair, was I had lost my stepmom. And when I lost my stepmom, I had written, actually, I might even pull it up. I had written her eulogy. And when I was writing her eulogy, I realized that she was the first person that I had told about my affair, and what a safe place she was for me to go to with that information, and how she had really responded in love to me. And there was no judgment or anything. And there was just, I do this thing where when I'm grieving, I like to grieve creatively. Didn't know that I would be grieving creatively so publicly. But I wanted to pay it forward. I wanted to be able to like foster her spirit in the world in the productive ways that she had protected me in life. And so when I started going viral on TikTok, I was like, oh man, there might be something here. Like, what is this? I don't know what to do next. And I went on to Upwork, and I had made a post, and I was just like, I think I'm developing an audience here. I don't know what's happening, but I am getting contacted by a lot of people who are struggling, and I want to be able to help them, but I don't know what my next step is. And naturally, when I don't know what my next step is, I look to somebody else to help guide me in what I need to do next. And I really look for trustworthy people. So whenever I went into the interview stage of developing the community, well, actually, it was first develop the podcast, then develop the community. The person who had been interviewing me, or who I feel like we were both interviewing each other. You know how they say like, oh, were you the interviewer, the interviewee? I'm both, like all the time. And I had met Kevin. And so Kevin was he was really interested in understanding what it was that I was looking to do in the world, because I think at the initial onset, it could have been interpreted a variety of ways. Is she justifying affairs? Is she validating poor behavior? All of this stuff. And he really took his time in evaluating what it was that I wanted to do and what I thought would be helpful. And he had said, he was like, you just keep mentioning community over and over again. And I was like, yeah, man, I needed new friends. like the paradigm that I was working off of. And when I say the paradigm I was working off of, basically my circle of people, my circle of influence, my knowledge base, I felt like that was what really needed refinement, not necessarily me changing who I was, but really understanding who I was and who I wanted to be. So that kind of prompted the community. And I had no idea if it was going to take off or not. Kevin was really instrumental in telling me how it would and really inspiring belief and hope within myself.
Kevin is amazing.
He is. He's absolutely
He's
incredible. I feel so fortunate to have met this person on the internet, and for a really long time, I got kind of cold feet about it because I was like, I'm just talking to a bunch of strangers through my computer. What am I doing? But now I see things a little bit more clearly. I was asking for help from someone who was capable of helping me. And he certainly was. And he was like, all right, let's get the community built. We'll do some founding members. And my biggest stumbling block was selling it. Like, he was like, okay, so now you have to get on TikTok and tell people about your community. I was like, can't we just build a website?
People just
and
come.
He was like, how? Yeah, I was like, if I build it, they'll come. And he's like, how will they know where to go? And I was just like, oh my God, I have to become a salesperson.
It's a difficult balance as an entrepreneur, particularly in the field of trying to help people, whether it be through coaching or therapy or whatever the support network it is that you're offering. That the primary focus, and obviously I can relate to this completely, that my primary focus is to help individuals who are struggling in their situation. They feel stuck and they need their, let's say, their Kevin in some sense, in the way that you found that person to help you at that particular point overcome that particular obstacle. And then at different points during your journey, you find different resources and different things that help you move on to the next step or to solve the next problem.
And it really does just require me being open to it, right? Like me being open to influences that are different than the ones that I had previously. And so, yeah, that's kind of what inspired the onset of the community. And I'll even say that it was frightening at first because I thought the only community I could trust were people that labeled themselves as Christian.
Okay.
And that was really tricky for me to unravel because then I was like, well, there's a lot of prerequisites that have to be in place for someone to be a Christian. Like they have to be born in a certain place. They have to be born to a certain family. And I realized how judgmental that was of me to think that the only
I don't think
person
I'd
that
really
could help
realized
me.
that. So how did that unfold?
It unfolded because, well, when we first got together, we decided to move. So it wasn't just that I was like changing my partner. I was changing my entire life. I was changing my entire approach to life. And we had actually built a business together, Stan and I. While we were building that business, I had figured out that I can be a professional partner and a romantic partner to the same person. And so I told Stan, I said, okay, you get to choose. You get me as a person or you get me as a professional colleague. I can't be both. And he was like, I love you for you. Do whatever it is you need to do. And I went and I got a new job. I got this new job.
Amazing.
And I knew that I needed friends. And so I just really started to make myself open to making new friends at work. And I did. I thought that I would never be able to secure a level of happiness that I had prior to the affair. Little did I know, I had no idea what happiness was before the affair. So yeah, that was kind of how it all trickled down. And
yeah, so I know there's a couple of things that jump out. One is that recognizing that, and I'm just thinking in terms of context of for people who are even in the community, that there are these steps, these stones, these guiding lights, these things that we pay attention to help us move from one phase to another, to move us through this journey of life, through this journey of healing. And I think it's very easy to think of them as finite things that have a beginning and an end. I don't really believe that to be true at all about any aspect of life. It's all about that flow from one stage to another, which is exactly why happiness and fulfillment and content and all of these things they don't really exist in some complete sense. It's not like a material object that you get to hold and have and feel at the end of the journey, at the end of the path. It's like the gold pot at the end of the rainbow. It doesn't exist like that at all. It's about flowing through that full human experience of positive and negative emotion, and dealing with everything that comes your way, and knowing that at different times in your journey, you have to change direction slightly. You just change the coordinates. You maybe get on. I always used to use the analogy of like getting on a train and just like getting going. And you get on the train and you go past different stations, and sometimes the train stops at stations and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you can get off at those stations and catch a later train and still head in roughly the same direction. And sometimes there'll be, leaves on the track. And in this country, you get leaves on the track and the whole network goes to pot, and everything stops. Maybe not quite, but certainly sort of heavy, things that can really sort of like put an obstacle in your way that you weren't expecting. So you may have to get off the train and get on a bus, because that's the alternative route to get to the destination that you thought you were going to. And the point is, it's kind of this never-ending, like permanently adjusting journey that we take.
It's learning how to live, right? It totally is learning how to live and learning how to grieve. I think that that's really important. I remember a lot after the affair thinking that I just needed to run back to the past. I thought that at one point, like, I had written, I think I just need to go back to my parents' house and try to grow up again. And that was more of me wanting to like duplicate what I had already done. What I needed was a new approach,
Yeah.
And I go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's interesting as well, because I think about all the people that come to me who have experienced an affair, either on either side of the spectrum, and the initial thought is to want to go back to some place, particularly for those who have been betrayed. They want to go back to how it was before. And then it's interesting to hear you say that from your perspective as well. It's almost like, if I could go back and do it all again, then how would I do it differently? But retrospectively, when we actually think about what the past was, it's like, well, no, we use the past as the information source to learn from, to move into the future, rather than go back to the past and basically fuck it all up again. Let's use this. This is the next stepping stone. It's the next part of the journey. Which is,
somebody had said to me in the midst of it, they said, you can't just run back to the past because it's familiar. And that resonated very deeply for me, because it was like, if that was so satisfying, then why did I leave in the first place? I don't think that trying to get to a state of being that existed prior to the present moment is the direction that we want to go. I think we want to go forward. We want to go up. We want to, really move ourselves in productive ways. And if we're constantly trying to go backwards, then are we really embracing the natural state of existence, which is constantly changing?
Of course. And I suppose we find ourselves in that internal battle, it's a bit like the devil and the angel. It's those voices that we have on our shoulders, one giving us the confidence to move forward, but usually the louder voice is the one that's trying to hold us back, the one that's trying to make us do it again. Let's get it right. You're not good enough. You're not worthy. You don't deserve this. All of this, this terrible imagery. It actually reminds me of, I think I mentioned it to someone else just recently, but I saw a video for the first time only a couple of weeks ago by Ren, called Hi Ren. It's on YouTube, and it blew my mind. It's like the most insane, like, creative piece of musical, lyrical art I think I've ever seen, in all honesty. It's so original in so many ways. But the premise being that there's these two conflicting parts at all times. And of course, this is touching a little bit more on the sort of mental health perspective, but actually it relates completely across virtually all of us. There's always those two inner conflicting voices in terms of how we should navigate our lives. And actually, it's coming to peace with the fact that they both exist. And the harder we try and get rid of those doubts, that's what ultimately allows us to move through, and as I often find myself talking about, is recognizing that sometimes the situations, the circumstances that we face in our lives, whether it be a breakdown in a relationship, or the loss of a loved one, or a loss of a job, or some other major shift, an illness. Actually, these things, as unwanted and as undesirable as they are just the catalyst for so much growth if you're willing to embrace the discomfort and go on that journey.
Yes. Yeah. Embracing the discomfort and sitting with it and being like, why is this so uncomfortable?
Yeah.
And then
people
you
are afraid
discover
of it.
your own truth,
Of course.
like even just kind of doubling back to me thinking that being around people who weren't Christian made me uncomfortable. I was like, why do I think this way? Why do I believe this? And coming to terms with like, oh, I have a conditioned framework that I operate off of. And I can totally refine that since I'm grown and I am my own person, and I can modify it to fit who I really am rather than who I'm supposed to be.
Yes. I think that brings up like your value system. It's like, well, what are the things that are genuinely important to you? And using that as some kind of compass. It's almost
Instead
like,
of running yourself into like frustration over and over and over again, being like,
yes.
no, this should be satisfying. I heard somebody say once that the word should is could with shame attached to it.
I love that.
Me too. And now every time I
that's
hear it,
great.
I'm
And it's
like,
so true. These expectations that we have, because I mean, really everything's about how we think it's going to make us feel. It's about that. It's about setting some internal expectation about how we think the future is going to be based on the decisions that we make today. That hope that the future would be in some way better, or that we get away from that discomfort in the past. It's all about trying to make those intentional decisions. But we set these expectations for ourselves and for the people around us often, usually most often the people around us. And of course, people are pretty consistent at not meeting our expectations, our set of rules of how they should show up in the world and how they should behave and how they should communicate and how they should deal with a breakup and all of these things, and the problem is at the moment those expectations are there, then if the other person doesn't respond or act or say the thing that they're supposed to say according to your rule book, then you get to feel terrible. Congratulations. But it was your expectation in the first place, not theirs. And even just being open to that, and noticing the control you have.
I told somebody recently, and I don't say this very loudly because I think that I would get, just totally obliterated on the internet. But I told
we
her,
are
I
on a
said,
podcast live here, but
not live. It'll be edited. Who knows? This might stay in. But I told her, I said, projection, or what did I say? I said, expectations of other people aren't real. They're a projection of what you would do in that situation. And when I said that to her in the moment she was in, she was like, well, I'm going to have to take a fucking break for a few minutes and mull that one over, because my mind just got blown up. Because if we're walking around with all of these expectations of other people and we've never communicated them, we are creating our own misery and just kind of cycling through it,
Yeah, 100%. And we see it in people pleasing. There's very few people I meet in life who aren't either currently or recovering people pleasers. And that all comes from that trying to, control, and not necessarily in a definitively manipulative way, in a deceitful way, but in a way for you to try and make yourself feel better. They're just unaware. Exactly.
They're unaware of it. I always, whenever I really stewed on the concept of people pleaser, I was like, this is just a well-marketed label for also the word manipulator. And the reason why I like the label people pleaser is because if you are a people pleaser, you are much more inclined to listen to content that calls you a people pleaser, because there's almost like oh, well, it also means I'm selfless. Oh, it also means, like there's all this inferred meaning inside that label that is more positive in your own mindset.
It even sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Go around pleasing people. I mean, why wouldn't that be a good thing?
Yeah, why wouldn't that be a good thing? It's just softer and it's lighter on the ears.
Yeah, but you're right. It's not. It's like setting a healthy boundary. It's not an ultimatum. It's not a way to control the other person. It's not with intent to manipulate. It's just for you to take responsibility for you, for what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and owning it. Because the temptation is to want to. It's funny. we're talking of, you said shame, it's made me think of blame. And I always think of blame. It's like, if you want to sort of try and understand blame, remember that it rhymes with the word aim. And usually it means that we're aiming our frustration, our thing, at the person or at the source of our discomfort. So basically, we're not taking zero responsibility ourselves for what it is that we're feeling or what it is that we're experiencing, and it all goes external. And
it makes somebody else responsible for the way you feel.
yeah, which is, I mean, how powerless do you want to feel?
Oh, totally. That is a way that we kind of perpetuate our powerlessness, is by playing the blame game.
Yeah. And I say it with the utmost love for all of the people that are listening, because I really do genuinely care. And it would be great if I could magically go and brainwash everybody into seeing how they can fix all their flaws. Mind you, that's saying it's an eternal, like I say, there is no destination. I'm on it all the time. I have many of my own flaws, but just to notice that, and again, frightening buzzword for some people, but you're waving your own victim flag. You're essentially just having that little label. You might as well be wearing a baseball cap that says, "I am a victim," on your head. And of course, there are genuine victims of circumstance. I'm not disputing that. Like, there are situations in which people are victim of circumstance, but that doesn't define you for the rest of your life.
God, you and I must be on a similar plane somewhere else in some alternate universe, because I was thinking about the whole victim mindset. And if you resign yourself to a victim mindset, which you can be a victim of a situation, that doesn't mean that you have to stay a victim.
100%.
And I think that the only person who can save you is yourself. And it really is about empowering yourself with knowledge, connection, those really important, crucial things to being a human.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't think that you had implied that anybody wasn't a victim with that statement. But if you resign yourself to the victim mindset, you're definitely walking around looking for people, or not even looking, but you're making yourself susceptible to people who take advantage of people pleasers.
Yes. The irony being that you can do that to yourself.
Yeah.
And you can be
God,
your
you
own.
and I are so good at tangents.
I like it. Anyway, so talking of tangents, because I am conscious that this is something that I can tangent very well, and I will definitely challenge you on this. It's one of the reasons that I record my podcast often in sections rather than just talking freely for 20 or 30 minutes. Because if I do, I'll be talking about my cat. Things will go so off. And it's
that's a good tip.
It's fun for conversation, but if I'm for the person listening, not always so fun for the listener. If they thought they were going to be listening about, I don't know, people pleasing, let's say,
the men's community. Yeah.
The community. That was it. The community. So the community. Let's come back. So you went on that journey, and you had this sort of inspiration through what you'd experienced through your mum, and then you had those
creatively
challenges.
Grieve, and I was like, oh, you know what? I see what all of these content creators are doing on TikTok, and they're validating people in the place that they're at. They're meeting people where they are. So, whenever I saw relatable content and I would pause on it, I would be like, what's happening here? Why do I pause on this content? And I started to realize what was happening was it was surfacing something that was true for me that I hadn't given much attention to. And seeing the external validation of that reality on my screen was one of those moments where I was like, oh, I understand how content works now. I did not understand how content worked at that moment, but I understood how important relatability was in moments of solitude, or not even solitude, but isolation. And I was like, oh, I know a grip of people who could use a little bit of being validated as a person in the midst of a very isolating season of life.
Yeah.
And so I did it. I just did one little thing, and I just can't believe that one night, and I was even staying in my parents' house. I was cleaning it out after, she had passed away. I was helping my dad move out, and I was just having this moment, I guess you could call it an emo moment, whatever. And I was like, man, I never got to talk to her about how difficult it was. Like, yes, I disclosed the affair. And yes, she knows like all of those pieces, but her and I never got into the depths of what I was feeling. We weren't that type of family. But I was definitely that type of person. And so with the community, it was really interesting how healing it was, even for me, to be in there and witnessing the stories that were being disclosed. And it was just like this balm, like almost this healing balm that like was like, oh my God, you felt that way too? Like the Me Too movement was pretty much drummed up by women using their voices and saying, this is really hard for me to say out loud because they also fear that they'll look like the victim. They fear that they will be perceived as something that they aren't. And I think that that is the truest fear of all of us, that we will be perceived as something that we are not.
Yes,
And
I
then
think,
it
I think
really
that's
gets
very true.
into, yeah, the how much does external perception really matter in your life? You
It's really
know?
interesting. I genuinely believe for almost all situations and examples that I can think of, that I have this belief. I heard it from somebody else several years ago. I can't remember where the source was, but it resonated with me, and it's something that I thought, that's something that I both want for myself, and I think I can really begin to embody and embrace. And that is that I'm happy, and I think I've said this to you, I'm happy for people to be wrong about me.
Mhm.
I'm genuinely comfortable for you to misinterpret what I do or what I say or what I mean, as long as I feel that I've lived in line with my own value set
Mhm.
in whatever it is that I have said or done. Like that,
Mhm.
that's fine. So there is still some. I even noticed I still have some attachment to it in some sense. There are some rules and conditions that apply in certain circumstances where I feel like I need to maybe to have a little bit more control, maybe just a little. I haven't fully released that desire to control, but generally speaking, like in day to day life, and certainly for the most part, in terms of sort of my business, in terms of how I communicate, in terms of the way that I show up online, conversations that we're having here, I am genuinely happy for people to be wrong about me, because I
Yeah.
know that what the message that I'm sharing, the authenticity of what I choose to be and how I choose to show up in the world is true to me, and I
Yeah.
can't control how you think or feel, whether that be you, Chelsea, or anybody that's listening. And actually, it would be completely hypocritical of me to say anything otherwise, given that one of the main things I help people recognize is that we can't control other people. So
Mhm.
for me to
Mhm.
sit here and want to try and manipulate how you interpret what I say and what I think and what I feel would be, well, it would be foolish, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So it's
It
actually
would it
quite
wouldn't be
releasing.
worthwhile.
No.
It wouldn't be worthwhile. If you are the other woman in your relationship and you love this podcast, you would love the Other Women community. The Other Women community is a membership program designed to help other women just like you reclaim their relationship with themselves and heal from their affair. We provide a safe and supportive environment for you to open up and talk about your experiences. We give you the tools and resources you need to grow into an authentic, empowered individual. If you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey, head on over to theotherwomanandthewife.com/community to learn more about the membership and all it has to offer. All right, let's jump back into the episode.
So the community starts, and like you say, it's created this space for a sense of validation, a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning, a sense of a reduction in feeling alone.
Yeah.
And this it starts to evolve, and it starts to snowball, and some more members come in. And what was the first 6 months like for you as this thing that you've created? You've had this
Oh,
success on TikTok, and now you've been able to channel
I
that with
put
the help of Kevin
so
and
much
create this community.
I put so much pressure on myself in the beginning. I was like, I need to be there every single day. I need to respond to every single post. I need to make sure that I give everybody exactly what they need and say exactly the right things. And I did that for like the first month, and then I burnt out naturally. So the community, once it started to really like keep itself alive, and I'll say a community will exist as long as the people participating in the community are doing just that. as long as they are participating with each other. It does not require one single person. It requires many people.
Yeah.
And so those first couple of weeks were pretty draining because I was like, oh, nobody's sharing. Oh, nobody's, X, Y, and Z. And then I realized that I just needed to be patient with it. Some people were going to come into the community and they were just going to read. They just needed to read other stories, knowing that they weren't the only ones experiencing what they had been experiencing. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people think that inside the community, all they're talking about is the connection that they feel with their AP. But what really goes down inside the community is a lot of discussion around the indecision that exists, the pain that exists in saying goodbye to a season of life that they feel that they are no longer suited for, whether that be the marriage, whether that be the relationship with their affair partner. And also, you're leaving an entire life from what you thought you fit in. You're now aware that it does not fit you. And you're going to move forward, and you kind of just need someone there by your side asking how you are, or responding with sincerity and genuine concern of how you're doing. And once the women started doing that kind of naturally inside the community, I was like, oh, okay, like on to the next thing. Now I need to go build a course. Now I need to go build a coaching program. Like, the inertia that I feel towards building resources for people who have experienced this in life is incredible. It has totally lit my soul on fire again. It's like, it was almost like a year before I started the community, I'd come to this place in life where after my mom had died, I really started to embrace the time that I had with my kids and was hyper aware of the experience of parenting that I was having. Not about, oh, are my kids happy? Oh, is my husband happy? I was more aware of like, I'm a mom and I'm experiencing motherhood. What do I want that to look and feel like from my own perception, rather than allowing external pressures to direct that? I remember being really overwhelmed with sleep training and being so frustrated because I was like, I followed all the plans, I followed all the guidebooks and stuff, and really getting back in touch with my intuition and allowing my daughter to drive some of that learning curve for me. So instead of paying attention to somebody who's not her, and instead paying attention to what is the goal here and what is it that I'm trying to achieve, I think that the experience of motherhood brought me to a whole new level. And it was weird because I was like, am I doing some self-sabotage shit by going back 10 years and surfacing all this old shit? And I was like, I don't know, maybe it kind of just needs to breathe a little bit. And I did. I went back and I kind of like reopened old wounds a little bit. And what I think I was trying to do was gain empathy for a perspective that I wasn't privy to. I was not privy to the experience of a betrayed wife. And the, experience of a betrayed wife was certainly my mother's experience, my biological mother. And so I kind of wanted to get to know her in this way. I had been studying a lot about contact theory and this idea that you can promote healing by talking with strangers who have nothing at stake when it comes to very personal conversations, and how it's easier to open up and disclose because you know that they are not going to try to throw it in your face or take it out on you with this intel, because I'm definitely a believer in my personal reality is mine and I get to choose who I disclose it to. Nobody is necessarily, deserving of my personal reality.
I see this quite regularly, where people find themselves trapped within their own relationships, regardless of the specific dynamics of whether it's the man, the woman, the betrayed, the unfaithful, and they find themselves trapped in a situation, often because of that sense of shame. Because the shame exists on both sides, of course. Well, wasn't I good enough? How didn't I see it? Versus, how could I have done this to the person that I loved? And all of these things and challenges that come from that, and they isolate themselves which is frightening. Like from an external observer perspective, my role as a coach is very neutral in that sense. But when I think about it from like that more humanistic perspective, it's like by containing everything that you're experiencing and not having any resource, any outlet for it. And it's surprising, like we can find these outlets in quite a variety of places. Sometimes it's just a pen and paper, and sometimes it's the voice note on your phone. Sometimes it's, like I say,
and that's the outlet piece. And I think that, I journaled for a really long time and I found it to be helpful, but I needed a soundboard. I needed
something back.
Yeah, I needed something back. My journal couldn't talk to me. I could talk to myself in my journal, but at that point, I needed more than just me. I needed connection, and I'll say intentional connection, like people who really wanted to connect with me and experience life with me in a way that some people just were not willing.
Yeah. And again, I think
finding your people, right?
It is finding your people. And I think this applies to all kinds of relationships, whether they are with your significant other, your romantic, your long-term partner, your wife, your husband, or just those people that you spend time with. And you can choose to be in any relationship, and you don't have to be in a relationship, or you don't have to be part of a relationship that you don't want to be in. And nor would you want to be in a relationship where the other person also didn't want to be in. It's like, I don't want to be in a relationship with somebody who doesn't want to be in a relationship with me. I don't want to be the reason this person is in, or at least even if it's just them telling themselves that they're in discomfort, whatever that looks like. I want somebody who is open and different and contrasting and challenging but engaging and supportive and nurturing and yeah, it sounds like quite a complex wish list, but it's probably not as much as you think.
Like, I want someone who's genuinely interested in me, like genuinely interested in being in relationship with me. And if I get the sense that you are not genuinely interested in a relationship with me, then I take the responsibility upon myself, Like that's when I'm responsible for who I put around myself. I'm not responsible for who they are, but I am responsible for who I put around me.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so I think like with the context of the community, and obviously we've got the men's community on board now, and or at least very, very soon. And we have these two things running in parallel, but obviously with very similar objectives. And I foresee there will be similarities, and I think that there will also be differences. I think there are certain barriers that men in general, particularly in Western society, face that maybe some women don't. And there's an element of just being able to be open and to know that it's okay to talk and share, and and knocking some of those barriers down. It's a case of actually having to be willingly vulnerable in a situation where you put yourself you expose yourself in a way that maybe you hadn't considered doing before in life. But by being in a community like this, where everybody is essentially in the same boat or very similar path, very similar journey to you, but also with that sense of anonymity, it creates a space where you can release what it is that you're feeling. Otherwise, it just ends up as this pent up, long lasting knot that you can't get rid of, and it buries itself, or you turn to some alternative substance or source as a way of chasing that dopamine hit. You and me were talking about that dopamine, the sugar hit that we both desire so much in our lives. But there's always, the problem is there's always like a net negative consequence to these things. Whether it be drink or drugs or spending or gambling or porn or whatever it is, there's something that feels good in the moment, gives us that rush. It distracts us from that discomfort that we're experiencing, but usually has some long-term net negative context in terms of we have weight gain, we lose money, we become in debt, we start to affect our physical and mental health, we start to damage the relationships around us, all because we just don't want to feel.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to feel. We don't want to feel the discomfort of our own feelings.
Yeah.
And with men in general, or in particular, I should say, when I've spoken with a lot of men inside of affairs, the challenge seems to be this who am I as a man if I'm not a husband? Or who am I as a man if I'm not a father who's married to their mother? This rub that exists for them, thinking that their identity is inside of, one role with one particular person is really difficult to observe, being where I am now, because it's hard to imagine a life now where it is completely led by people outside of me.
Yeah.
And my hope for the men's community is truly these men start to gain an awareness of themselves, why they like the things that they like, and whether the things that they like are good for them or not. And if they are good for them, then okay, it's okay to like something different. And it is totally okay to change your mind. And I think a lot of people have not given themselves that allowance of changing their mind, especially when it comes to the way that they're operating their life. I think that when you are satisfied and you are inside of an affair, you are kind of kidding yourself because it requires deception. And if your satisfaction requires deception of others, then I think that there are alternative routes to take. And I think one of the trickiest parts that I've observed of men inside of affairs is, how do I do this without crushing her? And I'm like, okay, you're still centering somebody else in a decision that you need to make.
Yeah.
There are ways to be supportive and considerate of our partners when choosing to leave a relationship, even when there is infidelity at play. And I think that we so quickly want to jump to the conclusion of, well, I can't now because I cheated. And it's like that's only more reason to reconsider the initial relationship.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. Completely agree.
I'm super stoked about the men's community. I think it's going to be a real jumping off point. It's so interesting looking at the evolution of this business, though, because in the very beginning, what I did was people really wanted to share their stories with me. And so I set up just a Gmail account and I was like, oh, send it to me in an email. Little did I know I would get 3,000 emails from people who just wanted to share their story,
Wow.
And
Yeah.
when all of those emails came through, there was one particular email that stood out to me. And I sat there in bed crying, reading it. And it was from this man who I will not name, but he has also been a part of building the men's community. And he was one of my coaching clients. He stuck with me until I actually got the coaching program built. So over the course of a year, he had been consuming my content, making tough decisions, doing the hard work, making the choice to be actively honest and actively discern how much to share with other people. He's probably one of my favorite people on the planet now because he had supported, he probably didn't know it. He was seeking support from me, but he was also supporting me in a mission that was very close to home for
Yeah.
me. And just seeing him now, how liberated he is and how much more at peace he is with his past and how much understanding he has of the purpose of relationships and when to participate and who to participate with. It's remarkable, really.
It's amazing. I love
And
it.
I really hope that for a bunch of the men that come into the community, because a lot of them are just like, I don't know what to do next. And usually you just need a suggestion if you don't know what to do next.
It's
And
just
when the right
that's something to
suggestion
aim
comes
towards.
along, it's like, oh, that's exactly what I needed. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, we live in a sense of story, and our lives are made up by the stories that we tell ourselves, and it's what resonates for us. And sometimes you can hear the same message multiple times over a period of time, and it can have a completely different meaning for you. And I think sometimes there's an element, at least, where we hear the same message enough times, and it begins to make sense to us, and then we can start to make that shift. There is,
Totally.
yeah.
that, like, even you saying that, I remember contemplating this business idea and the community and everything. And when I had heard people say, well, I think it's really important to meet people where they are. I'm like sitting there going like, meet people where they are, meet them in a fucking Starbucks. What the fuck are we talking about, people? Like I love the way you laugh. The way that sentiment did not hit for me until probably about 4 years ago. I remember sitting inside of therapy, bitching or complaining about somebody. And my therapist had said, yeah, I just think it's really important to meet people where they are. And I was like, oh, she means their level of understanding. Like, instead of condemning or judging or berating somebody for a choice that they had made, like, I could just meet them where they're at and work to understand and allow them the space to understand as well. And so, yeah, the meaning of certain statements we hear, timing is really a hell of a thing. I, didn't spend too much time thinking about timing until this whole venture. And I was like, oh my God, who's in charge of timing? Who's in charge of timing?
It is really interesting because even I acknowledge I find myself sometimes thinking, oh, well, I'm saying the same thing a lot. Like, I feel like I'm saying the same thing a lot. But on the same note, it's like, that's what people need to hear. People need to hear the same thing so that it can fit and fall in line with them at the right time for them.
It takes time to sink in.
Yeah. And just time to process and understand.
Absolutely. What else would you like to know about the community?
I love the evolution of the community so far. I often try to think of the community members in terms of, we've spoken about journey a lot already. And there's that awareness. So they're in a place of discomfort and they go out into the world, the online world, to try and seek this something. They don't even know what it is. And like you say, like you described, you were scrolling TikTok or Instagram Reels or something, and you see something that just resonates and connects with you. And it often is somebody else's talking about themselves that just happens to fairly closely align, if not perfectly align, with what it is that you experience. And that sends you down this particular rabbit hole. And all of a sudden you become like a consumer junkie and you start, absorbing
hyper-consuming content.
Yeah, hyper-consuming. Yeah, absolutely. And that is okay to begin with. Like it's the natural response. We're trying to make sense of the world. We're trying to make sense of our situation. We're trying to grab foundation and get something to get hold of. And then there becomes a point where, like we've just been talking about, that a message starts to resonate. We start to hear the same things. Okay, actually, I've heard that in a couple of different places now. And maybe there's something more to that. Maybe I want to explore that a little bit further. Maybe it's the concept of forgiveness. Maybe it's understanding. Maybe it is the people pleasing that we've been talking about. Whatever it is, there's something that just sort of just resonates in some way. And then there's usually a point where we find ourselves more drawn to a specific message or a specific outlet or a specific person or resource. And, for obviously the people that have come through your community, it's been you. You have been that magnetic source for the people that you've been able to support and help. And obviously the same is true for the people that listen to my podcast and part of my community. The same sort of thing is true. And then so that moves us on to the next phase where we feel like we have a more specific purpose and we start to resonate and connect and understand and feel heard and feel validated and know that we're not alone. And we start to begin to consider the possibility that we can feel safe, even in a time when we haven't felt safe for a very long time. And again, so we can think of like the initial social media contact being phase one. Then there's like the community, there's the connecting with people in a similar situation to start to know that you're not alone, to start to learn from other people's experiences and to take some of those tidbits and sort of implement them in your life in some way and form. However, even that point, that's not the completion of the journey. That's like probably the most important transformation in the sense that that's the point where you kind of get on the train, if you like. The analogy that I used before, it's like, okay, well, I'm on a train, I'm heading in this direction. I've got no idea where it's going. I'm not sure where I'm getting off, but this is the direction that I'm going. So I suppose what I'm interested in now is like, what do you think is the place that people go beyond that initial setting?
I love how this naturally just led into this. I was creating content yesterday And I've been having my short form content be more informed by a group of girls that I'll call the insiders. They're fucking awesome. And because I was getting really just pretty insecure about what I was sharing on the internet. And so I had shared that with them. And they gave me a piece that one of the girls had written inside of the community. And when they sent it to me, I said, I was like, I get really nervous about reading stuff from the community because I feel like that is a private space. And when I do read stuff, I make sure that the person who wrote it is okay with me reading it publicly. And so the insider that I had asked to just make sure it was okay with the poster that I share this, she went back and she asked, and the girl who had written it was like, yeah, of course. Like, fuck it, that's what it's there for. And she just finished her membership. So my expectation of people coming into the community was never like, oh, and you'll be here forever, whatever. Like, be there as long as you want to be, as long as you need to be. I'm not interested in somebody being there that doesn't want to be there type thing. And this is what she wrote right before she had ended her membership. She said, as I come to the end of my membership here, I thought I'd share my experience. I've been a silent lurker throughout most of my time here. In the beginning, I was so eager to share, but lacked the words to describe the cosmic disruption that was my life. Many of you helped me with that. Your stories, your comments, your words of wisdom on each other's posts, and posts of my own. Thoughts I had been trying my best to articulate and could not. I could see it. I could feel it. I knew it, but words always seemed to fall flat in comparison for me. I felt so much. I'm so thankful for this soft place to land in one of the scariest times of my life. Things I was so sure of and things that I was not. The knowledge I gained here from the experience of others was medicine for my mind and soul. I had the pleasure of holding private conversations with a handful of you that brought new points of view and advice that I will always treasure. I felt validated, heard, understood, something you usually do not get when you have found yourself in an affair situation. I am forever thankful for that. The future I could envision for my life 1 week post-discovery and joining this community is still the same one I see sitting here today. Listen to your inner voice and trust yourself. You already know what you want. The only defining difference between day 1 and day 173 is I'm not scared anymore. I have watched some of you come in on shaking fawn legs and find the strength of giraffe legs, asking for exactly what you want, standing your ground, and doing hard things. You made me feel braver, stronger, more confident. Yes, you can. Yes, I can. Yes, we can. Womanhood. Do not dull yourself down for men. That goes for your affair partner and your husband. Life hint. We don't need them. We were just conditioned to think we do. Check your own boxes, fill your own needs, and the rest will come. For those of you who come in unsure, when you first hear, awesome, this man fulfilled your needs. But what's happening in your marriage? Think about it. When you utter the words, no, I do love my husband, we get along great, question everything, and then question it again. It doesn't matter how long the affair was, how many times, or how good you believed your marriage or husband was. You begin to realize no affair just happens. The answer is always there. It can take some time to find it. It will take some time to admit it, if you are like me. But it's there. The first step to recovery is admittance. Affairs happen because of unhappy marriages. Affairs happen because one or both spouses are unfulfilled somewhere in life. Affairs happen because people are willing to leave their spouses, and most times because they want to. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The affair partner or the unfulfilled spouse? I have grown so much in the last 6 months. I have healed so much in 6 months. Affairs hurt, but damn, do they heal too. I fucking love it because there's no fucking way I could have wrote that 6 months post-affair.
That's amazing.
No way. I told Kevin when he asked me, he was like, how long did it take you to feel like you were back in control of your own life after my affair? And I was like 24 when everything went down. And I was like, probably about 5 years.
It was incredible, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And it was all like, I mean, I went into just individual, really my own individual thought life, and really just sat there with myself. And I called it, I would turn things over in my head, but I was very much alone in that experience. Yes, I had therapy. Yes, I had friends. Yes, I had all of these other things, but nobody who could relate to the difficulty of it, really. And so watching these women have that now is so incredibly rewarding. This is the most rewarding work I have ever been a part of. And I have been a part of some impressive things like dealing with orphans and dealing with third world countries. But this particular one, the emotional turmoil that people endure when they do something they thought they would never do before, is so empowering for me to just be alive,
You really should be proud of yourself, Chelsea. And I feel, and I'm sure many other people do, are so grateful that this is a mission, a focus that you have chosen to pursue.
Yeah, it wasn't without a lot of thinking. I did a lot of thinking about this before I went full speed, And now I'm really happy it's here, and I'm so glad you're here to support it, because there's no way I could have done this on my own. And even, it's funny when Marissa introduced you and I, and I already had the sense that you had the role betrayed spouse. I was nervous. I was like, oh my God, he's going to get up here and tell me all of the things that I'm doing inaccurately or unprofessionally. And you have just made me feel, you have made me just feel so much more comfortable in this space. So thank you so much, Luke.
You're more than welcome. It's an absolute pleasure.
I look forward to the growth together, dude.
Yeah,
I'm so stoked to have you.
Yeah,
all right. Well, I guess we got to close it out for the listeners. And I can't wait to see how many men join your community and how many men really take advantage of the services that you offer, Luke, because it really is inspiring, and it will change the way that you feel and look at life in general.
I can't wait to meet them all.
All right. Until the next episode, I guess, huh? See you soon.
Bye-bye.
I don't know how to